So on the matter of carbon dating, we already immediately uncovered all kinds of questionable things, making this method of measuring ages of matter questionable. Evolutionist and geologist Dr. Ernst Antevs has sharply criticized the radiocarbon method because it contradicts his estimated dates for the glacial period, which is based on his highly suspect varved clay calculations. So, it's a matter of politics, not a matter of science, isn't it? But his point about the unreliability of the carbon-14 dating method is nevertheless well taken. Is nevertheless well taken. His point. In appraising carbon-14 dates, it is essential always to discriminate between C14 age and the so-called actual age of the sample. Notice his determination to present his own unverifiable method as actual. The laboratory analysis determines only the amount of radioactive carbon present. However, the laboratory analysis does not determine whether the radiocarbon is all original or is in part secondary, intrusive, added later, or whether the amount has been altered in still other irregular ways besides by natural decay. Ernst Antevs, in Journal of Geology. Now, if that isn't a respectful publication, I don't know what is. A conference on radiocarbon dating held in October 1956 resulted in the following conclusions about the reliability of the method. Local variation, especially in shells, can be highly significant. Possible variations in the size of the exchange reservoir under glacial climates are unimportant. The most significant problem is that of biological alteration of materials in the soil. This effect grows more serious with greater age. The longer it's there, the more contaminants can be present or introduced later. To produce an error of 50% in the age of a 10,000-year-old specimen would require the replacement of more than 25% of the carbon atoms. For a 40,000-year-old sample, the figure is only 5%, while an error of 5,000 years can be produced by about 1% of modern materials. Much more must be done on chemical purification of samples. F. Johnson, Arnold, and Flint, Radiocarbon Dating in Science magazine. Notice the prestige of these publications. We're not just shooting our mouth off about what somebody said around the corner. These are publications that are scientifically respected. The problem of atmospheric contamination by fossil fuels has also come in for some consideration, since the burning of coal and oil during the past century and more has added measurably to the amount of carbon dioxide in the carbon style. This means that the standard figures as to the present content of carbon dioxide in the exchange reservoir of carbon on which radiocarbon age calculations are based are incorrect with respect to conditions under which older specimens were formed and have since been decaying. One contaminates the other. Although this might be corrected approximately by modifying the standard to which one before the Industrial Revolution, the following caution is also in order. Since completion of the present list, a careful study has been made of a series of samples of known age. It was found that the activity of radiocarbon in the atmosphere was going up and down even before the Industrial Revolution. De Vries and Watervolk in Science magazine. Dr. Don Patton, in his tape number 1, says, probably the radiometric dating system that receives the most attention is radiocarbon, though it's probably less significant for evolution creation controversy than any other because it covers such a short period. Nevertheless, there are clear indications regarding radiocarbon. There are serious problems, and without going into the particulars, notice a quotation from Robert Lee from the Anthropological Journal of Canada. He says, the troubles of the radiocarbon dating method are undeniably deep and serious. Despite 35 years of technological refinement and better understanding, the underlying assumptions have been strongly challenged. Now, this is not a matter of contamination or something that happens to be added. This is the underlying assumption, the basic mechanics of the system. He says, it should be no surprise then that fully half of the dates are rejected. How do you trust anything of that, such a great number of errors? Now, that's the authority that uses it, that believes in it, at least to a degree. You check at least half of them. And I have found from my experience that that's a conservative estimate. For example, in Marvin Lubinau's book, Bones of Contention, he has about 3 chapters on the dating controversy that involved the skull 1470. Of course, not dating the skull itself, but the layer above it, the volcanic tuff. He points out that the dates they got were way off. The ones they got later, they assumed were correct, but they later found that they wouldn't fit either with the evolutionary theory, and so they redated and redated. They did it 41 times, and we're talking about the scientists at Cambridge University. It's not like a high school, you know, supposed to be the most accurate in the world. They chucked the first 40 efforts and kept the 41st. Well, that's not a scientifically dependable process. You're just getting what you assume to be so to start with. And so we understand that Lubinau goes on to say, the wonder is surely that the remaining half come out to be accepted. There are gross discrepancies. The chronology is uneven and relative, and the accepted dates are actually selected dates. Now, that's the truth. It's not that this is what the evidence demands, but it's what they pick out of a wide range that sorts what they assume to be the case to start with. We've done some radiocarbon down at Glen Rose, Texas, in the area where I've been working in recent years. There is wood in the formation supposed to be 110 million years old. But this wood fragment from that formation dated by radiocarbon at UCLA at 890 years, less than 1,000 in a layer supposed to be 110 million. Just a little bit down, about 100 yards from that, in an area that we've excavated, where we'd taken the overburden off, we got to another carbonized stick. We dated it at the UCLA Carbon-14 lab, and this dated about 12890, not too far away from the same formation, 890. That's a huge difference. All in a layer supposed to be 110 million years old. We've excavated 2 dinosaurs from that area, dated at UCLA Carbon Lab at 19,000 years, in a layer supposed to be 110 million. We've dated now 19 different dinosaurs, not supposed to be any radiocarbon at all in dinosaur bones. They've been extinct for about 65 million years. So what is radiocarbon doing in them? That's what they're told anyway. And carbon-14 plays out in a few thousand years, 30, 40, 50, 80, some might say. Well, we found it in all of the dinosaurs we dated, all 19. The ages rate from 10,000 all the way up to 30,000 years, and everything in between. Obviously something is seriously wrong. We noticed a statement reported in Science on an international conference of 145 experts in this field. And they say throughout the conference, emphasis was placed on the fact that laboratories do not measure ages. They measure sample activities. Wow. That connection between activity and age is made through a set of assumptions. One of the main assumptions of carbon-14 dating is that the atmospheric radiocarbon level has held steady over the age range to which the method applies. In other words, we got the same amount of carbon-14 now than we had when this critter died that we're trying to date. However, we have seen clear indications that that is not a valid assumption as we see the ages varying drastically. We know that that's not the case, in fact, because the level of C14 has been measured to be increasing. It was thought to be at equilibrium. If we use the analogy of the faucet pouring water into a tube, that for the sake of illustration we'll assume to be infinitely high, as this column of water increases, then the weight of water would increase and would force the water out faster at the bottom. Now, when the rate of flow at the bottom increases to the point where it equals the rate of formation of the entrance at the top, then we have the level remaining constant. It would stay the same. If you have as much water flowing into a lavatory as flowing out, then the level is going to stay the same. We have measured and found that the carbon-14 in the atmosphere is 30% short of equilibrium. Now, this has been done at UCLA and a number of other places, and by Lubenow himself. Lubenow's original work, for which he won the Nobel Prize, determined that it would take less than 30,000 years to reach a state of equilibrium. However, it's 30% short. Now, this is not a linear process, it's an exponential process. It slows down as it approaches equilibrium, and you can calculate how long it would take to reach at the present level, and it comes out to be something less than 8,000 years. That certainly fits the picture of the creationist and the young age of the Earth, much better than the evolutionist. If it only takes 30,000 years to get equilibrium, and it's not there, I think we can see clearly that what the straightforward facts indicate. And when you calculate how long it would take to get to where we are, and we see a few thousand years, then obviously there's good reason for radiocarbon to say the Earth is only a few thousand years old. You must make a number of assumptions contrary to what we observe in order to get it to come out old. Now, we can make assumptions that rates remain constant and that the observations we make hold true over a few thousand years, and that process is really scientifically more valid than if these rates were to be assumed as remaining constant over billions of years. And when we do assume a constant rate over a short period of time, with a number of indicators, we see a very clear indication of a young Earth age for the Earth. Dr. Patton says, H.E. Seuss, UCLA, presented the latest determinations as deduced from the current activity of dendrochronologically dated growth rings of the California bristlecone pine, the C14 concentration, and indicated that the concentration increases. We have H.E. Seuss. Where? Science magazine. Therefore, the content of carbon-14 in organic matter is still on the increase, not having reached equilibrium yet, which takes an estimated 30,000 years, which would mean it's a testimony to a young Earth. Pre-flood. Before the flood, what about carbon-14? Proportions are not factored in. Prior to the flood, it is highly probable that the ratio of ordinary carbon to radiocarbon in the atmosphere was much higher than at present, mainly because of the global semi-tropical climate and the vast amounts of plant life found around the world. This effect would have been augmented by the smaller amount of carbon sustained in the ocean then than now. Since the oceans were smaller and the land areas larger before the